We'll talk a little bit about Tyler Herro's All-Star selection and what it means for him and the Heat. And we discuss the latest reports of Jimmy Butler possibly heading to the Big Easy on today's bonus episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, however you might be tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. I want to get to the Jimmy Butler stuff. Jimmy Butler going to the Pelicans. The Pelicans registering interest in Jimmy Butler. We'll get to that here in a second, but I want to start with Tyler Herro named an NBA All-Star. That news broke while we were recording yesterday's episode, David. So we got a chance to react to it live. If you haven't heard that, we did that yesterday, posted last night, YouTube and podcast feeds. But now that we have had a chance to digest it, I want to talk about what this means for the Heat's future. But also, have you seen Tyler Herro's reaction to it?
Here's the last one in the Eastern Conference. The last reserve is chosen by the coach. From the Miami Heat.
Let's go!
24
Hell yeah! Let's get 47% and
500 mark right now. Number 7.
David, he is on the brink of tears in that video. He is as emotional as I have ever seen him, and it goes back to what I am just so happy for that dude. This clearly has mattered to him.
He seems almost nervous for a guy who's like come up with such big shots throughout his career and doesn't mind having the ball in his hands in the waning moments of a game where he has to hit a big shots. And we've seen him in the playoffs, we've seen him in the finals, we've seen him during the regular season where he steps up in these moments and he embraces these challenges, as Spo has told us a number of times. He seems like he's nervous, like he's pacing, like he doesn't know what to do with himself. And honestly, my feeling had been that the players would know about this beforehand. Maybe things aren't revealed to them as much as they looked like they had been in the past. Because again, this is not reporting or anything like that. It was just on the outside looking in. My thought was always that the teams would be notified first. It's like, hey, you're going to get he's been selected as an all-star, so they can prep their campaign, get whatever graphics they need to, prepare whatever social media they need to in order to kind of let the player know they're going to be headed to the all-star game, and that eventually the rest of the world finds out about it. That is not the case. That guy does not know that he's going to be selected as an all-star. Like, he looks like he's waiting on the news just as clearly and eagerly as the rest of us.
Yeah.
And he is as excited as you could possibly be. Like, he he flexes his muscles. He's like, roasting in the moment.
It's the man celebration, right? You start flexing and screaming. I mean, it's
Let's
totally
go!
Like just scored a touchdown in the NFL celebration, like end zone celebration. It's great. And to your point too, these guys are not prepped ahead of time. The Pistons did the same thing with Cade Cunningham, right? So it's not just a Heat thing, but they got the reaction from Cade Cunningham. I suppose that had he not gotten the All-Star nod,
you would never see this.
You just don't see the video. Exactly. You just don't see the video. And so this is the cool part, right? And to see Tyler Herro that overwhelmed in that moment, I said yesterday that, talking with him in the locker room after the last game, how he was just sort of not really thinking about the All-Star selection and all that. That clearly was not the case. He was thinking about this a lot. And then I had not seen at that time, Anthony Chang from the Miami Herald wrote a piece, talked to Tyler Herro about it. And Tyler Herro said, I'm nervous. I am nervous about this. This feels like draft day to me because I just don't know what's going to happen. So he had no idea that he was going to be on All-Star. The fact that he was voted in over Trae Young and LaMelo Ball is such a sign of respect. And it's such a win, honestly, for just wholesome, quality, impactful to winning basketball. And I don't even mean that as I actually think Trae Young has been better than his stats have been in Atlanta. LaMelo takes 30 shots to score 30 points, and he didn't even make it as a reserve at all. And Tyler Herro did. And that sign of respect from the rest of the coaches, is that the part that Tyler, like, what is it here with Tyler Herro? What is the emotional trigger here? Is it the fact that he's just always wanted the all-star thing, the star next to his name on Basketball Reference? Is that what it is? Or is it the respect from his peers? That's the stuff that I'm curious about. I would imagine it's a little bit of all of it.
Yeah, it feels like just getting recognized in that way is kind of just, it proves that you belong. Because it's not that he's necessarily a pretender or imposter syndrome the way that we've talked about with Duncan Robinson for all those years. This isn't a guy who just fell ass backwards into an all-star selection. He was one of the top prospects in the country. He went to a great school in Kentucky. He was a lottery pick. Like, he's been kind of down this path ever since he joined the NBA. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get rewarded with this. A lot of players go in the league and never sniff an all-star game. Goran Dragic was a great player. He was all NBA, third team all NBA with the Phoenix for one season. And he got an all-star nod late in his career, maybe one he didn't necessarily deserve, but more of a recognition for what he'd been able to accomplish.
That was an injury replacement, right?
Yes. This is a little different. This is like, there are other candidates, great candidates, all-star levels, former all-star candidates, and LaMelo, Trae Young, Tyrese Halliburton, etc. And you're still seen around the league as better than them. That's a hell of an accomplishment there. And again, just being recognized.
The I can be Trae Young. Remember that quote from
yeah.
Not only you might be better than Trae, you're better than Trae Young this season. You have been better than Trae Young. I do think it's a recognition. You hear about basketball players say this all the time when they win a championship. I'm a champion. Nobody can ever take that away from me. You're an all-star, Tyler Herro. Nobody can ever take this away from you. What I thought was also interesting about this video, as a quick aside here, is that he starts celebrating as soon as Ernie Johnson says, from the Miami Heat.
Oh yeah, he knew it was him.
So it wasn't going to be Bam or Jimmy. It was going to be. It definitely wasn't going to be Jimmy at this point. None of the coaches are going to sign that one off. But that I thought was cool. Speaking of Bam and Tyler Herro here, though, so we got a chance to sleep on this a little bit after it was announced. We reacted live on yesterday's show. The Heat have 2 All-Stars on the roster once Jimmy Butler is gone. And I don't know what they're going to get for Jimmy Butler. We're going to get to that here in a second. But in a post-Jimmy Butler world, at minimum, they are going to be starting this new era with 2 All-Stars, with Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo. 2 All-Stars who clearly fit really well together. I mean, there's no question. I think I've always had concerns about Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo's fit. They never really felt like an on-court fit. And it's almost a miracle that they've accomplished so much despite how clunky the basketball fit is. But Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo, there's no question that makes logical basketball sense. And you have 2, and they're both all-stars now. And so you're the Heat, and you get to kind of navigate this post-Jimmy Butler world with 2 all-stars. It could be a lot worse.
It's not a bad place to be. And you have to look at it from that perspective. Again, who knows what the team's ceiling is? I think internally and from the players within that locker room, they're still of the belief that they can do something different and that they can challenge other teams, maybe teams with better records there. Like, maybe the record doesn't reflect it, maybe the on-court product doesn't always reflect it. But I think there's still a strong internal belief in what they're capable of doing because they've been in these situations before. Yes, a lot of that was dependent on Jimmy Butler, and I won't take anything that he's accomplished away from him.
I even the short-term stuff is fine, but like, Bam's 27, Tyler's 24.
Sure.
Like, to me, the outcome of this season and what kind of noise they can make in the postseason, to me, doesn't even matter this year. It's about what happens next. And you're starting this with a 27-year-old All-Star and a 24-year-old All-Star. So yeah, maybe this team does not have the ceiling that the Boston Celtics or the Cleveland Cavaliers do, or the New York Knicks have. But that's almost not the point here. It's, well, they're building something. They're starting from, we have 2 All-Stars. And that's where we're starting our foundation to build up to the point where we can compete with these teams in a real way.
I am really curious to see what Tyler is like in the All-Star setting, because he's not Bam. He's not the great recruiter. He's not the friendly guy. He's not the one with all the connections. Like, players around the league love Bam because he does the dirty work, and he's a much more humble, agreeable, and amicable version of Draymond Green. It's like, who doesn't want that guy on their team, And so not just the Kentucky connection, which, again, Tyler is from Kentucky. He played in Kentucky.
Yeah.
But he doesn't seem to kind of relish in the same kind of Kentucky connection that Bam has with De'Aaron Fox, with all the other players that have come before and after him. It's just, he's never seemed to linked that way. And he seems to be very much, again, from my experience and talking to him and seeing him, he is his own person. I would think that he does not have the same level of friendships within basketball, certainly not that Bam does, and maybe not even that some other players around the league does. Like, rarely do we see him kind of go to other players off the court. I know there's a connection with Tyrese Halliburton, another All-Star as well.
Well, yeah, they grew up together. Yeah.
So there are some. I'm not taking anything away from what Tyler is like off the court. Right.
Like,
so
Bam
now
was
in that
with
locker
USA
room
for years.
Yeah.
He's been to 3 All-Star teams now.
Yeah.
This is Tyler's first, and he's also 3 years younger than Bam Adebayo.
Yep. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see him kind of hobnobbing with the best players in the league here. Like, what's he doing when he's sitting in the locker room next to LeBron James or somebody like that? Like, these are transcendent moments that a player will never forget. And I think it's going to be incredible for him. And I think he's going to, again, be filled with even more confidence and belief in himself because he knows now that he belongs. He's been welcomed into a very, very exclusive club. And that being the case, I think it's going to be a great thing for his career. We might even see a better version of him moving forward when he comes back with even more renewed confidence after the All-Star game. So it's going to be a really interesting thing. And I wonder how the other players in that locker room will start to maybe develop a more thorough appreciation of who Tyler is, and this is his opportunity, not just for the recruiting purposes and things like that, but you do wind up making friends. You do wind up kind of attaching yourself to at least 1 or 2 players while you're sharing this all-star experience. And it's going to be a great opportunity for Tyler, and one that helps the Heat immensely because we're already seeing the benefits, or we at least always know that the having Bam Adebayo on the roster is a huge benefit from an off-the-court perspective because you can bring in a player like Damian Lillard or Kevin Durant, both of whom said they want to play with Bam Adebayo. I don't know that Tyler gets that same kind of recognition, but it's a step in the right direction.
So he's going to be joining other first-time All-Stars like Cade Cunningham, Victor Wembanyama, Alperen Sengun, Jalen Williams. So I think the first-time All-Stars, they kind of tend to be around the same age, and maybe they kind of
Cunningham and Herro, the backcourt of the future. I'm saying it here right now.
That actually kind of makes me sad for Detroit. It's been rough for the Pistons. Like, that's not,
nope. Who cares? Go back to where you were.
To your point, though, about the respect from his peers.
Yeah.
Where all the things you said about Bam, I'm going to do the dirty work. I'm going to set the screens for you. I'm going to be the foundation of our defense. You don't have to worry about that stuff if you're going to come play with me. Tyler Herro is different in the way, like very different in terms of how he is a basketball player, but I think he would generate a different kind of respect. Tyler Herro is a hooper. And you see guys like Kevin Durant and players like that be like, no, that guy's a hooper. Like what he does with that in and out dribble, he can finish with both hands, like all this stuff. Like that's the stuff that also garners a ton, and that Bam does not do. That is not Bam's game. Bam is a big man.
Absolutely.
Tyler Herro is a scoring guard. I think that's going to be when he's in that locker room with some of these other guys who have been there, with Damian Lillard, with Kevin Durant, with all these guys, and you're gonna be like, dude, like respect, like you got here.
This kid can play,
Like yeah. So I think
UT's talked about him. UT's talked about him being like the most skilled player he's ever played with, and that's like a guy who's played with Dwayne Wade and LeBron James and Chris Bosh, like multi-time Hall of Fame level players. And for Tyler to go into a situation and be like, oh damn, I didn't know your game was like that. I could really generate a lot of eye-opening. It's like, oh, I thought you were just the white boy with a nice crossover and the occasional jumper. This is going to be a whole different level of appreciation amongst his peers and his opportunity to kind of just say, you know what, I'm here because I belong, and I'm not here just as a fluke or anything like that. I am a skilled basketball player despite appearances to the contrary or whatever preconceived notions you might have. So this is a really tremendous opportunity for him to really kind of branch out and have other players and other fans around the league kind of garner a new level of respect for what he's capable of.
And an opportunity to pick the brains of these other All-Stars.
Oh, yeah.
Which you hear players talk about that stuff. First-time All-Stars, you hear them talk about that all the time. Oh, my God, I got to just practice, a fake All-Star practice, but I got to practice with Steph and KD and LeBron, like these legendary practice players, and really see how they go to work.
You made the comparison to Curry before. Let's see if he can take a few pages out of that particular notebook and see whether or not he can add to his game.
We got a new report on the Jimmy Butler front because it's a new day, and that's just what happens. The New Orleans Pelicans could be attempting to get into the mix here. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Best way to support the show. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Do both. Do both. Little bonus episode for you here today, recording this Friday afternoon. And just right before we started recording, David, Mark Stein and Jake Fisher report that the New Orleans Pelicans are a potential team to watch in terms of maybe trading for Jimmy Butler, and that they've approached the Heat about a potential Brandon Ingram for Jimmy Butler swap. That reporting has been disputed by some other places, but the idea, though, of them at least having that conversation, to me, that feels like it probably had to have happened, right? If Miami's working the phones and New Orleans is where they are. But that's less interesting to me than just the fit and the construction here. Brandon Ingram for Jimmy Butler. This is a symptom to me, just this idea of the Miami Heat lowering their price to the point where I think a Jimmy Butler fit in New Orleans is clunky as hell. Like on a basketball level, that almost makes no sense to me. But we're getting to the point where if the price is so low, do you almost have to do it in terms of just making the talent upgrade if you're a team like New Orleans or Golden State or Milwaukee and all these things where you have some on-court fit issue concerns potentially, where you just say, well, you know what? The price is so low, like we almost have to do it anyway and just figure it out later. And that's what it kind of feels like to me. If the Pelicans are actually interested in swapping Ingram for Jimmy Butler, and there's some contract stuff that we can get into here in a second too, but it's almost just a talent play if you're the Pelicans that you almost have to do if all it costs you is Brandon Ingram, who you think is going to walk away after this season anyway.
Right. You can still make some kind of improvement to the roster, and he provides a different flavor there. I don't know. I'm curious to see the Big Face brand of chicory coffee available somewhere on Bourbon Street. It's going to be nice. Tremendous crossover opportunity there for him to build the Big Face brand. I don't know. Like at this point, it doesn't really matter. If the Pelicans are willing to take Jimmy Butler and his salary, that's their problem. That's up to them to figure out this fit and the clunkiness of it, or whether they can make it work or whatever. From the Heat side of things, Brandon Ingram's a nice player. Like he's got his warts certainly, but I think you could probably make him a better player. He's a scorer. He's certainly along the lines of the win now player that they're looking for, a guy who can contribute right away. And you kick the can down the road just as you did with Jimmy in terms of what his contract demands are and what that means for the team. But if you can add a level player like him, and if he walks, and guess what? You get the cap space anyway. So it's not that bad a deal for Miami, at least in my opinion. I think it works pretty well in terms of being able to regroup something. And I don't know that picks would be involved in it. So that's the kind of problem there, is that now you're giving up on a couple of things. You want players with short-term contracts, you want win now players, and you want draft picks. Well, you might only get one of three of those things, and that's not exactly the best place to be. Well, theoretically.
Right? I mean, Brandon Ingram is on an expiring contract. Yeah. And he's a win. He's not maybe, I don't know if I know he's injured right now. I don't know if he's, I think he's supposed to come back.
What's season. The rush in coming back to play for New Orleans? So, like at this point, the season's gone.
Maybe we should look up what the latest injury stuff on him is before we start talking about maybe his availability. But in terms of, like, this is where we get into the contract part of it, is the reason why the Pelicans have had such a hard time trading Brandon Ingram is because nobody wants to pay him his next salary. Right. And if you're the Heat, I don't think you have that problem because you've essentially been looking for expiring contracts anyway. And if Brandon Ingram just walks into the building as an expiring contract who may play again this season and help you during this playoff push, because the other thing that the Heat want to do is still make the playoffs. Brandon Ingram can help you make the playoffs. This team needs scoring outside of Tyler Herro in a bad way. Brandon Ingram can do that. And then you get him in your building for a few months. You see, do we want to re-sign this guy? Whatever. Like, we can figure that part out. Or he just walks away for nothing, and you get all the expiring and cap flexibility that you wanted in the first place and trade. So it's like, okay, we can get Bruce Brown as an expiring contract and just let him walk, or we can get Brandon Ingram as an expiring contract and let him walk, and then we get a little bit more good basketball player for 3 or 4 months here. That to me is very intriguing if I'm the Heat, because Ingram is an obvious fit on the court for them. And if you have questions about his long-term viability in terms of his health or what his next contract might look like, you could just walk away from that pretty easily if you're the Heat. Your contract's expiring. We're just not going to negotiate with you. And then all of a sudden you get the $14 million in cap space. You get the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. You dip below the luxury tax and restart the clock on that. Like, you get all of the flexibility that you're wanting, and you get to turn the page on the Jimmy Butler situation.
Do we know who his agent is? Is that a pre-existing relationship with the Heat? I don't know for certain. I know that he's a Duke player. You've got a Duke connection running through the front office. I think that certainly helps. Maybe you could even re-sign him. Like, I understand you're still looking at 2026, but if Ingram shows out this year, he comes back and
clutch guy.
Yeah, no.
The Heat have
Makes
rebuilt
things a
their
little bit
clutch
where I thought he
connection.
was. I thought he was, but maybe I was hoping that wasn't the case because I think
they're back.
things are improving. Well, things are
Yeah.
improving. We don't know they're back because
They're
aside
back.
from
What are you
Alec
talking about?
Burks, right?
They negotiated the jersey sponsorship. They're making
Isn't
each
Burks
other
a
money.
clutch guy? Isn't Burks a clutch guy?
Alec Burks is a clutch guy. So they signed Alec Burks last summer, and then
They did him a favor.
Clutch Sports Group negotiated the jersey patch. They're just making each other money. That's as back gets in the business world.
I suppose you're right. I suppose. I mean, I guess it goes a long way towards rebuilding a relationship that seemed like it was broken for a number of years. And maybe that was overstating things a little bit, but I think it had been frayed at the very least. And so, I think the market has cooled considerably on Brandon Ingram. Like we've heard talks about wanting a max contract and things of that sort. But if you can stay in Miami and you can kind of rebuild things around him and Bam and now another all-star in Tyler Herro, that is not a bad place to be. And I think you can probably negotiate a friendlier deal, a team-friendlier deal, maybe even a short-term prove-it deal, like a 1+ whatever. We'll check free agency back in 2026 and we'll see how you do it. We've seen those kinds of deals in the past, and it would certainly,
especially coming off of an injury for Brandon Ingram, you might be looking for that. Like, look, if the market's, he's not going to get the max salary in free agency, so you can let Brandon Ingram go test it, figure out what you got to do. We have your bird rights, so figure out what you got to do. If there's a
sign trade and everything,
congrats, do what you got to do. But if not, we're here, and you can start off, and you can let the market dictate Brandon Ingram. And I think a guy like Brandon Ingram is going to be a fascinating case study in terms of what the new CBA does to guys of Ingram's quality. Who's a good basketball player who would have used to get the max every day of the week, and now under the new CBA,
based on
potential, get the max
anymore.
So does he kind of settle somewhere in like an Andrew Wiggins contract, $28 to $30 million a year? That seems like appropriate. Like that seems like an appropriate contract for him. He's going to have to. That's less than what he's making now, but he'll have to settle. But that's what it is. So yeah, if you can get him back for that, then maybe that's something that you do. The New Orleans. So also one more thing on Brandon Ingram. He is actually expected to come back this season. It should be like within the next few weeks. Like I think that probably
after the All-Star break,
post All-Star break. Yes, exactly. So you get him. So that makes sense for Miami. I would want a draft pick back if I'm the Heat. The Pelicans have all their own picks, all their own first-round picks, and then they have two future picks coming from Milwaukee. If I can get, and it doesn't even really matter which one to me, but if I can get a 2027 pick from New Orleans, and then I unlock the ability to trade 2026 and 2028 because now the Stepien rule, etc. That's what I would be looking for. If I can get Brandon Ingram and one first-round pick, that might be the best deal on the table between now and the trade deadline.
And one thing we haven't talked about is that it also gives you leverage now against Memphis, Milwaukee, Phoenix, whatever the other teams might be involved in an interest for Jimmy Butler. It's like, you know what, we've got a deal on the table with New Orleans. We could just take that and we'll be happy to do so. But if you want Butler on your team, or if you think you want player moving from X team to your roster, then you're going to have to give us a little bit more. And so it always behooves the front office to have as many options as possible. And you want to keep that kind of, I'm sorry?
Are the Heat finally leaking stuff?
Well, if New Orleans is telling reporters, as they apparently have, that there's no interest in Jimmy Butler, it's got to be coming from somewhere. So it might just be coming from Miami. Who knows?
Drumming up some leverage, drum up the market. Well done. Way to play the market in the year 2025. Miami front office. This is good. We'll see what happens. Obviously, this is Friday. Have a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday. The trade deadline is Thursday. You are not going to want to miss an episode. We have bonus episodes because there's news always happening a lot lately. And of course, we have our regular daily episodes. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Have a great weekend.